For me, visualization has been a massive game changer for me. It's something that, it was only since the Olympics that someone said, oh yeah, it's about manifesting your own destiny and like visualizing and getting, but without realizing it, I've been visualizing for since I was a little kid, 9 years old. Any dream is essentially visualization. You're visualizing yourself achieving something you really want to. So when I was 9, I had this little medal book that I would draw around all the medals that I'd won, put my age, where it was, what the competition was, and how I felt about the competition. And in the front of that book, I drew a picture of me doing a handstand saying London 2012, the Olympic rings, and all that kind of stuff. And at that point, London wasn't even the host city. It was still a candidate city. And it was just something that I dreamed of since I was a little kid. And to finally get to that point where I was actually be able to do the handstand in London 2012 and actually compete made me realize that, oh, wow, I've been visualizing this. And then in the build up to 2020 and 2016, I was every night when I laid in bed, I would visualize the 6 dives that I do in competition every night before bed. And initially I used to try and visualize them doing them perfectly, but things would go wrong. Things would slip in and you'd start to visualize yourself to having a bad day. And I used to work on it every single day, every day to get to that point where I was able to do the dives in my head and do them perfectly every single time. So, and I started to encourage Matty, my synchro partner, to do this as well. If every night in bed, visualize yourself doing those dives perfectly at the Olympic Games. Every day, just visualize yourself doing it. It may not be perfect at the start, but you'll get there. And sometimes it makes your heart race and it makes you think, oh my gosh, you put yourself in that position. You put yourself in that heightened adrenaline rush that you get when you're at an Olympic Games. So the more you visualize it, you get to that point where you're like, oh, I've done this a million times. And you get to that diving board and you're like, I've done this so many times now. And all I've got to do is execute what I visualized millions and millions of times. And standing on that diving board at the Olympic Games, just before I go up there, I do another visualization. Before every dive, I'll do a visualization of what I'm about to do. And I also do a really micro meditation, mindfulness thing at the back of the board where it's just breathing work, 10 big deep breaths at the back of the board with my eyes closed, just to try and ground myself and just give myself a little bit of that, take away a bit of that anxiety and fear. Because it was actually one of my diving heroes, Greg Louganis, he once said to me that fear is just excitement without breathing. And sometimes you can stand on the end of that diving board and feel terrified about what you're about to do at an Olympic Games. You know that you've worked your whole life for this one moment and you have to execute. And that can be extremely, you could get terrified of that moment. So sometimes just taking that chance to just breathe and just put yourself back into and again, breathing and all of that just puts things into so much better perspective and you have such a clearer head. So when I got onto the end of that diving board, that fear no longer was fear. With breath, it became excitement. And I knew I was ready to do what I needed to do.
Yeah, Mel Robbins said the same on this podcast. And I've been thinking about that a lot since. It's breathing has, the excitement, anxiety connection, but breath work, certainly. I try and do some of this on my Instagram lives. I'm doing one later today, actually. And sometimes it's met with people going, it's just breathing. What's this got to do with anything? But you forget when you are in stress or anxiety, you either hold your breath, sometimes you hold it down really low, sometimes it's quick chest breathing, and it has such an impact on our bodies and cognitively how our brains are working, and we've just lost that connection. We completely forget. It's so important. And of course, you had to do a lot of visualization this year in the run up to the Olympic Games because you had a knee operation, 8 weeks before the Olympics? So you actually couldn't dive. Visualization was your training.
Yeah, exactly. Throughout the whole pandemic, we weren't allowed to dive in the pool and we couldn't do, all of our training was done doing somersaults onto our sofa cushions or going on runs, Zoom workouts. So visualization became the only way I could train. That was the only way I could be in the pool, was in my head. And the same with my knee surgery. I was 8 weeks out, and 8 weeks before an Olympic Games is when you're meant to be training at the highest possible level and tweaking and perfecting everything. And I wasn't able to do that. I was on bed rest. I had to have my leg up and I wasn't able to walk. And all of a sudden I was put in this position where visualization was my only training. Visualization and visualizing myself doing all my dives was the only way that I could get myself in the pool. I got to the point where I was able to get up to the stairs onto 10 meter. I'd get in my trunks and I'd stand on the end of the board and just visualize myself doing them. Even though I couldn't jump, I couldn't do the dive, but I could stand on the end of the board and just visualize myself being there. And that, for me, was what made the transition back into the pool after the pandemic. Well, say after the pandemic, after we were able to get back into the pool, and then after my knee surgery, because I only got back to full-time 10 meter training 2 weeks before my competition. So it happened, I don't quite know how it all managed to fall into place the way it did, but I think having that structure and that routine and having a really meticulous plan to get back to the diving pool and get back to and ready to do the Olympic Games really allowed me to get to the point where visualization was important, or the little rehab bits that I have to do around flexibility and for my knee, and the extra recovery that I was thinking about, all of the little 1% that I thought, if I do this, it might give me that extra chance. If I do this, it might give me a bit of extra chance. And all of a sudden I was so focused on getting myself back to being healthy that I think I went into the Olympic Games in the best possible shape that I could have ever done.
It's remarkable. I mean, I don't know how you didn't lose confidence at that time. I think focus is such an important word, because often, well, not often, all day, every bloody day, we're distracted because there's just so much outside noise. And especially for someone like yourself who, around the Olympic Games, all eyes on you, everyone's got an opinion, everyone's got expectations or assumptions as to what might happen. And especially with something like that, having a surgery before you're about to step into what is, a huge point in your 4-year cycle. I mean, I don't know how you didn't lose confidence. It is remarkable. Have you got tricks to stay focused at times like that?
This year has started off probably one of the worst, rough years. I mean, in 2020, in the beginning of that, I broke my hand. So that wasn't the best chance start to Olympic Games. And obviously the Olympic Games got postponed a year because of the pandemic. And I started off this year with a concussion that lasted about 2.5 weeks from just hitting the water and hitting my head on the water. So that took me out of training initially at the beginning of the year. And then just as I was getting back from my concussion, I got COVID quite badly. And that took me out of the water for about 8 weeks because I couldn't even walk up the stairs. Lance had to carry me down. I couldn't even talk. I was hospitalized for a night, and just because it was like one of the worst experiences of my life. And again, that's when I had to use visualization, and I had to just have that faith in my training and in all the years that I've been doing it, that I was going to be okay. Like, there was no option for me not to be okay. And then I competed the whole year at the World Cup and the European Championships. And right after that, it was when I then had to have my knee surgery, and then I was out for another 6 weeks. And it was just like one thing after another after another. And that was kind of when I just surrendered myself to it. And I was just like, you know what? All of these things are happening to me, and I have no control over them. And if I start to waste energy thinking, oh, why did this happen to me? Oh, I can't believe this happened. Oh, why can't I just not be injured? Why can't I just not be sick? Like, all of these things, all of that's already been and gone. It's already been done. It's something that's already happened. Yeah. And the more that you spend time worrying about it, the more that you spend time pitying yourself almost about it. Like, of course, you have to process and deal with the emotions that come with being sick or being injured or whatever it is. But at the same time, things that have happened have already happened. Whether that goes for, doing a dive at the Olympic Games. If it was a good dive or a bad dive on the first one, the next one is a completely independent event. So regardless of what's happened before, the next one has the same opportunities to go as well or terribly as any other dive. So I think I just started to get to a point, again, with perspective and the experience of being an elite athlete for so long, that I was just like, you know what? I just have to roll with the punches, ride the wave of change, ride the wave of the unknown, and just stay completely in the moment, stay so present that there's nothing that has been in the past that can affect me as much, or anything that's going to happen will affect me. And just be able to stay focusing on the process of how I was going to get to the Olympic Games, and that process constantly shifting and constantly changing, but being okay with it. And knowing that right after those Olympic Games, I was going to go back, see my family, and life was going to go on. And I think that's something that, I think that's the only way that I could have got through this year, was to just try and be as present as possible.